KSA Entertainment is proud to offer programming to the men and women of our military and their families, serving all over the world on AFN, American Forces Network, seen worldwide.
Welcome back to Daily Flash. I'm Andrea Jackson along with Mitch English. There's been a major shift in America's housing market. The once red-hot Zoomtowns of the Sun Belt are fading. Joining us to talk more about it is James Rodriguez. He's a real estate correspondent for Business Insider. Hi, James. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
So what inspired you to cover this story about a possible real estate market flip?
Yeah, if you think about the early days of the pandemic, when you saw all of these cities in the lower half of the US, the Sun Belt, as you mentioned, really exploding, not just in, price, but the inventory was way down. There were not enough homes available for sale for all these people that were moving to those areas. And really the leaderboard has flipped. So these housing market winners from early in the pandemic have really turned into losers in a lot of ways, where you have sellers cutting a lot of their prices, you have inventory piling up on the market, and meanwhile these cities in the Northeast and Midwest are actually the new, quote unquote housing market winners. Their, prices are still rising in those areas. There's inventory is still really tight, and it really has just flipped pretty dramatically.
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions here, kind of in one big question. Why do you think the Sun Belt homes are losing momentum, and how are those Midwest and Northeast markets that you just mentioned winning now?
I think people are sort of inclined to think about it in terms of supply. Like, builders really focused on those Sun Belt markets. They saw all of these people moving to them, and so they built a lot of homes. I think that's part of the story. So a come down from those highs was almost inevitable. But what we've also seen is it really comes down to the labor market and migration trends as well. People have been moving from the north to the south for decades now at this point. But what we've seen recently with economic uncertainty, with borrowing rates higher, is people aren't making that move as much. So these Sunbelt cities aren't drawing as many people. The Northeast and Midwest, which have traditionally been losing people, aren't losing as many people. And the Northeast and Midwest really didn't build as much housing as the Sunbelt. So when you combine all of those factors, it leads to, pretty tight inventory in the Northeast and Midwest, and a lot more options and negotiating power for buyers in places like Phoenix and Austin and Jacksonville, places that were really, really tough to buy a home in just a few years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Florida. Our show is based here in Florida, but in the last 5 years, we have seen a building boom that has just been out of control. And so it's interesting that it's both a buyer's and seller's market right now, depending on where you are in the country. Do you foresee a full market correction soon?
I think of it more as a reality check for sellers that are in these places that are seeing a lot of price cuts. You look at some of these Sunbelt markets, and half of homes are slashing prices, and that's just kind of a realization that this is not the 2022, 2021 market where you could just throw something up for sale and it would sell super quickly for above the asking price. So I think it's, we're not in, full correction territory yet. I think you see in some places like Austin, home prices have dropped a lot, but I think it's more of buyers having more negotiating power than they did in the past in some of these markets.
And let me ask you this, it's more of a generational question, but I think, when you look at baby boomers, the whole goal for them was to buy a home, invest in real estate. And now we're looking at a younger generation that's like, I don't know if I really want that commitment. I think I'd rather just rent. Do you see those patterns changing anytime soon for younger generations looking to get into the housing market?
I think when you look at surveys today, the millennials and younger generations, there is still a lot of demand for home ownership. I think when you see some of this, sentiment around, I'm gonna bide my time and rent. I think a lot of that comes down to affordability too.
Yeah.
So we've seen the rent versus buy math really get out of whack here, where with buying, you're not just looking at higher home prices from the start of the pandemic, but you're also looking at much higher borrowing rates. We've seen the cost for everything from maintenance to insurance to property taxes go up as well. So when you look at all of that, I think it's reasonable for somebody to look at the market and say, look, I'm gonna just rent for a while until things change. And I think that's why you have buyers keeping such a close eye on mortgage rates right now.
Definitely. James, great to talk to you. Thank you so much. Go to businessinsider.com. We'll also have this on our website, dailyflashshow.com/FMI. And again, for more information, head to businessinsider.com and look for James's name.